One day, following a long journey, a merchant stopped to rest at a small inn at the end of a dusty mountain trail. The inn was clean, with a stable for the merchant's horse, hearty food, and a comfortable bed. Weary from his travels and filthy from the dusty road, the merchant requested to take a hot bath. Before he went to bathe, the innkeeper kindly passed the merchant some perfumed clay with which to wash. Having never before encountered such a thing, the merchant was surprised by the pleasant fragrance of the clay. Intrigued by such a rare item, the merchant asked the clay, "Where on earth can such clay be found?" Modestly, the clay replied, "I am nothing but common clay, but I had the good fortune to lie at the foot of a beautiful rose bush, and the close proximity to such sweet influence has produced this effect upon me which you so admire. Or else I would be nothing but a lump of worthless clay, as is my nature." Moral of the story: to be a good critical thinker, we need to expose ourselves to an environment in which critical thinking is nourished. Critical thinking is a framework that encourages you to socialize with people who are better thinkers than yourself, so that you may learn from them. However, if you socialize with people who don't know how to think, then you will learn how not to think also.
Welcome back. In this episode, we will continue looking at a few more reasoning flaws that we typically encounter in our daily lives. The first one for this episode is the perfect solution flaw. Let's look at this analogy to understand how this flaw works. This is a newspaper article which says that car thefts have increased significantly over the last few months. So much so that even the police are alarmed at the rate of the increase of car thefts. Now, take yourself from that scenario to the next one. We have a situation here where a sales girl is keen to sell a steering wheel lock to a prospective customer. And she says, "Sir, this is a highly sophisticated steering wheel lock. It's very difficult to crack. If you were to buy this lock for your car will be much safer. Given the increase in car thefts, this is what you should buy to protect yourself." Now the customer, the prospective customer, the man, turns around and says to her, "What's the point? Professional thieves can break any lock. You should know that. There is no point in spending money to buy this sophisticated lock. It's got no chance against a real thief." Now, what we see here is a flaw, a reasoning flaw. Is the customer right in saying that if a thief is serious about stealing the car, he will manage to do it one way or the other? Well, the customer may be right, he might be right, but he is rejecting a possible solution just because it is not a perfect solution. It's definitely not a perfect solution because if a thief is absolutely serious about breaking into a car, it's very likely, if he's got the knowledge and the experience and the expertise, that he will be able to break into any car. But does that mean that this solution is not a good one? No, it doesn't mean that. Because although you may not be able to prevent a professional thief, what about a petty thief? What about an amateur thief? What about a thief who doesn't have the experience or the expertise to crack this lock? The flaw that you see here is a reasoning flaw called the perfect solution flaw, in which the person who is promoting this idea prefers to wait until a perfect solution emerges. But we can't do that in real life, because if we were to wait until a perfect situation arises, we would be paralyzed and be unable to act. Now we have to look at it from a very practical or pragmatic point of view. Sometimes, in the absence of a perfect or complete solution, a half a solution may be better. It's not the ideal scenario, but a half a solution may be better than no solution at all. Now, just because some part of a problem remains, it doesn't mean that the solution is no good. It doesn't mean that the solution is not correct. This solution may actually take us closer to finding a perfect or more complete solution. We should look at it this way. Reasoning is like trekking through a jungle. It's not always possible to see the full way ahead of you. Sometimes you have to take baby steps, one step at a time, and when you take the first step, you see what you need to do for the second step, and the third step, and the fourth step. So you clear the way as you go. Reasoning is also like that. Problem solving sometimes also requires baby steps. So be careful of the perfect solution flaw. Do not reject a solution just because it's not a complete solution.
Thought is the wind, knowledge the sail, and mankind the vessel.
Next, let's look at a reasoning flaw called the equivocation reasoning flaw. Let's look at an example that illustrates how the equivocation reasoning flaw works. We have two individuals here, Shivaji and Ken. Shivaji says to Ken that all murder trials are illegal. Now Ken retorts and says, "That's crazy. How did you come to that conclusion? How could a murder trial be illegal?" Shivaji says, "Easy. Are criminal actions illegal?" Ken says, obviously, yes, all criminal actions are illegal. And Shivaji says, right, all murder trials are criminal actions, are they not? Criminal action here meaning as opposed to a civil action in law. So all murder trials are criminal actions. And if criminal actions are illegal, therefore it goes by reasoning that all murder trials are illegal too. Sounds like a very silly analogy. But this is a very real situation that's used in daily lives. We encounter this flaw in daily lives when one word or a phrase, when a word or a phrase is used with different meanings in different parts of the conversation. Let's take a step back and see what has happened here. The phrase criminal actions was used twice during the conversation, but each time with a different meaning. The first time the phrase was used, it was used in the context of committing a crime, as in a criminal action is a situation where a person commits a crime. In the second context, or in the second time the phrase was used, it was in the context of legal proceedings taken against an individual, as in the type of legal action that is taken in a court of law. So one phrase used twice, each time with different meanings. This is the equivocation reasoning flaw. Let's look at this example of a magazine article which states that the drug D14 should be sold over the counter. D14 is a drug that's helpful for patients who are in chronic pain. And the article says that a survey shows that 76% of the respondents want the drug to be sold in pharmacies. The article continues to say that there is clear consensus about the need for drug D14 to be sold over the counter. Now it proceeds and says there is also consensus and support from the manufacturer for easier availability of the drug. Finally, the article concludes by saying that drugs are approved when society reaches consensus about their value. And the article asks, why are we waiting? There is consensus all around for D14 to be made available over the counter. Why is it not being done? Why are we waiting? That's the gist of the article. Let's look at the type of reasoning which was taken in the article and detect the flaw that's apparent throughout the entire article. The word consensus was used 3 times, each time in a different context with different meaning. The first time it was used was in reference to the public, where the public says, we have a need for this drug and we want it made available over the counter. So public perception. Second instance the word consensus was used was in the context of the manufacturer, where the manufacturer says there should be easier availability of the drug. And the third time the phrase was used, or the word was used, was in the context of society, that once the value of the drug is demonstrated by society, the drug should be approved. Now take a step back and look at the word consensus. Note the inconsistency of the word consensus. It's been used 3 times, all 3 times with 3 different meanings. The fact remains that a drug is approved if its value can be proved. Now the article says that there's consensus from the public. But does the public consensus demonstrate the value of the drug? No, it doesn't. The manufacturers stand that there should be easier availability. Does that demonstrate the value of the drug? No, of course not. So in all 3 cases, the meaning of the word consensus is different. Now the value of a drug can only be demonstrated upon rigorous medical experiments and clinical trials, not because there's public perception and not because the manufacturers want it to be made easily available. But this flaw is not very apparent unless you dig deep into the argument and focus on the different meanings of the word consensus. So look out for the equivocation reasoning flaw, especially when ambiguous or technical words are present. The next reasoning flaw is the wishful thinking flaw. Let's look at this example. June, a student, says to her teacher, Stuart, "Sir, it doesn't make sense for you to give us so many exercises. It just makes a lot of extra work for you and it places additional burden on the class. Students should be self-motivated enough to practice on their own. You shouldn't have to give us so many exercises." Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? But this illustrates the wishful thinking flaw. What should be and what really is are 2 completely different things. June says that students should be motivated enough to practice on their own. Should be and whether they really are 2 different things, because reality is often in conflict with what should be. The actual world around us is a poor imitation of what the world should be like. So don't be fooled when you see the word should be. It doesn't mean that it is. Like in this example. Magazine article says, "Why should we worry about violence or sex scenes in TV programs? The parents should supervise what programs their children watch. It's not up to the TV station. That's the parents' responsibility." True. It may be the parents' responsibility, but the argument here is that the parents should supervise what programs their children watch. What they should do and what they actually do are two different things. So this is a reasoning flaw. Another common reasoning flaw is one that's called explaining by labeling. Let's see how this flaw works. We have two individuals here. We have Sasha and Anil. Sasha says, something is wrong with Anil. He has been acting strange lately. He shouts and screams at everyone for the slightest reason. Ruza comes in and says, you know what? There is absolutely nothing wrong with Anil. He's just got a bad temper. Now, what Ruza has done is given a label to Anil's behavior. Anil's behaving pretty badly, and Ruza has given a label of bad temper to that behavior. However, labeling does not explain the reasons. Labeling doesn't explain why Anil is acting in that particular fashion. When someone gives a label to a behavior or a situation but doesn't address the reasons, this is called the explaining by labeling flaw. Hiding behind labels is usually done when a person is ignorant of the real causes of the situation. And labeling is used to hide from the real reasons. Let's take this example. Shopkeeper says, my business is down considerably. While others are doing well, I'm not. So another person comes up to the shopkeeper and says, what else do you expect? Our economy is in a recession. Notice that a label has been given to a behavior. The behavior here is business is bad for the shopkeeper. A label for this poor business has been given, and the label is recession. But does the label explain why some do well at the business while others do not? It doesn't explain that. Labels distract from the real causes, and you need to be able to pick out situations where labels are used to hide from the real causes of the problem.
One man who has a mind and knows it can always beat 10 men who haven't and don't.
The next reasoning flaw is the glittering praise flaw. This is how it works. This is a poster which says, our country is at war. We need a strong and skillful leader. Mr. Riyab should be our choice. He's a good husband, he's a caring father, and an exemplary law-abiding citizen. Can you spot what's wrong with this argument? It's what you might term diversion at work. You see, what's needed to take the country out of war or to win the war is a strong and skillful leader. These are the skills that are required: strength and skill. From the information that's been given to us, Mr. Riyab is a good husband, a caring father, and a law-abiding citizen. Very good for Mr. Riyab. But does he have the qualifications that are required for him to lead the country. And the qualifications here are being a strong leader and a skillful leader. We don't know. That information has not been given to us. The information that has been given to us has distracted us from the real qualifications. None of Mr. Riap's attributes meet our wanted criteria. But the glittering praises have diverted our attention away from the real needs to the attributes, the positive attributes of Mr. Riap. This is a glittering praise flaw. Let's look at a second example. For students to excel in economics, we need to hire an exceptional individual who is an expert in the subject and can teach well. Miss Leong is the best person for the job. She started her own business 10 years ago and made tons of profit. She recently sold her company for a tidy sum. We need a successful person like her to teach our students economics. You see the glittering praise flaw at work here again. The requirements for the teacher are quite straightforward. There are two: subject matter expert in economics, and second, a good teacher, a good communicator, a person who can get a point of view across from himself or herself to the student. These are the requirements. Now, what information has been given about Miss Leong? The fact that she's a successful entrepreneur. Being a successful entrepreneur does not mean that she has the prerequisites that we spoke of earlier. So is there a match or a mismatch here? There appears to be a mismatch. This is another example of the glittering praise flaw, where through praise, the actual subject or the content or the reasons or the qualifications are disregarded and the person is praised instead.